Welcome to today's podcast, everyone. I'm excited to have Susan Harrington back for a second interview. And to give you some context, we recorded a podcast, gosh, it was October or November 2023, was it?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And you had just received the news that you had no evidence of disease. And that's the title of the podcast, Susan Harrington, No Evidence of Disease. And I do think that a lot of people have this question of, oh, okay, but are they going to get it back? And I hold this mindset that if you do get something back, we'll deal with it when it comes back. And it is one of the biggest fears that people have when they've experienced cancer. And so we're here because you did have a recurrence of the cancer, or you'll be able to give better words to it. And you've been on a whole other journey over the past year that I would love for you to shed light on and, yeah, share with the audience where you're at now. So, do you want to take it away from that?
Sure. So yes, I had clear scans and was NED. Unfortunately, it was short-lived. A following MRI of my breast showed that there was still a 7 mm something there. They weren't quite sure. And I was actually booked in to have surgery and have that removed. And something just kept telling me to have another scan. And so I flew to Queensland. I have my scans at Mermaid Radiology, and I had another breast scan. And that breast scan, they have a machine that no one else in Australia has. That breast scan showed that there was more than just one of these small lesions. My doctor described it as it looked like the tumour was dying from the inside out, and these were outside sort of little remnants. No one really knew whether they were active tumour or scar tissue or dead tumour, dead cells. So my surgeon still wanted to do surgery, do a surgical biopsy. She said she couldn't actually take it all in just a lumpectomy. I chose not to do that, thinking I could continue on the protocol that I'd been on. But unfortunately, I was told by my oncologist that one of the drugs that I was on was not available to continue. And look, there were lots of reasons why that was that she gave me. Ironically, I met a lady this week who was on exactly the same protocol as me, and she's actually been told she can continue those drugs for the rest of her life. So that's an absolute twist in my story, because I was told categorically that I couldn't do it. Anyway, so I chose to continue with what I could continue with. And I actually physically could feel the tumour coming back. I could actually feel it growing. And
did you feel that you could feel it growing? And did you have a thought that it was because you couldn't continue with this drug that had helped you quite a bit?
that's all I could think of. Originally, the protocol that I was on was not standard of care, and I was on 2 targeted antibody drugs with a side protocol of repurposed drugs. I was told by my oncologist that those 2 targeted antibody drugs, I would be lucky. I would maybe have a 30% chance that they would do something, but she doubted it would do anything at all. Within 3 months, it reduced my tumour by 30%. And within 6 months, they thought it had completely gone. And she was telling me she couldn't believe it. She was in shock. So the combination of those drugs with the targeted the combination of the targeted antibody drugs with these repurposed drug protocol clearly works. And this lady that I just met, exactly the same thing happened to her. Same cancer, except she had secondaries all through her bones, all through her body. And within 6 months, she was cancer-free.
Mm.
So the combination works. So I did think then that it was because I couldn't continue one of those drugs. And I clearly still think that. So I went back to my oncologist. I asked her, was there any way that we could approach the drug company, the TGA, and request a review of my case based on the results that I got when I was taking both those drugs? She was not willing to do that because she didn't believe that those two drugs, she had no way to prove that those two drugs were part of what caused my success.
Mm.
And so I had further scans. Those scans showed, unfortunately, that the tumour and the massive change cells that I had around that tumour had grown to 5 centimetres. And so the only option that they gave me was to have a mastectomy.
Do you remember how you felt
Yeah,
knowing that this tumor
I
was
was,
growing?
yeah, I was, how I felt about the tumour growing, I was angry. I was angry that I'd got so close to being cancer-free, and purely because of what I was being told then was some sort of regulation with the drug company and the TGA, that I couldn't continue that drug. So yeah, I was really angry, and I felt actually just complete failure at being in a situation now where I was only given one option, which was to have a mastectomy. And yeah, I was just devastated. And I remember ringing my kids and saying, I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to be left alone. And I'm still emotional about it. I just, I think to get so close to being getting rid of cancer and then to be faced with having to have such radical surgery. And it took me a couple of days of really just letting my emotions out. And I did a lot of crying, did a lot of soul searching. I really questioned, I really questioned the despair I felt and the failure I felt. You and I worked together a lot, and I I tried to in processing all of this and trying to turn how I felt around, I really started to try and concentrate on the fact that, or being grateful that I had an option,
Mhm.
because I knew, I know that a lot of people get to a point where they don't have an option. And I didn't stop looking for an out of this surgery. I really didn't stop looking. But at the same time, I tried to try and concentrate on getting my head in a better space, because I knew I couldn't really go into this surgery feeling the way that I felt. And I spoke to my doctor, and he had actually just got off the phone with some doctors in America that had just published a new study on ivermectin and cancer. And whilst I was on ivermectin as part of my other protocol, this dosage was completely different. So he asked me to change to this dosage straight away, which I did. And at the same time, I was contacted and introduced to a lady who had just opened up an energy healing center. And, it was
Actually,
eight minutes.
yeah,
Yeah,
can
it
we
was
speak
eight
about this?
minutes.
Because, oh, sorry, you're about to go into it, but it's something, the EE scalar, and
Yeah,
you've been really
scalar healing
curious.
system.
Yeah, you've been really curious about it, but there was nothing in close proximity
No,
to you.
I'd
This
been,
ties in with the other actually, do you know last time we
yeah,
recorded the podcast, you had just put your apartment on the market,
yes,
and then you were thrown into quite a gap.
yes.
Okay, talk about the EE scalar, and I'm going to bring
Yeah,
on your
this
apartment.
these healing centers, I'd actually been introduced to one in Queensland once when I was up there. And when I came home, I made a lot of inquiries, but every center that I inquired about was like an hour drive away, which you need to be in these centers for 2 hours. So it just wasn't viable for me. And I had inquired with someone that had an internet page, but it wasn't open yet. And ironically, when she contacted me to see if I was still interested, my first question was, "Oh, where are you?" And it turned out she was 8 minutes away from where I now live.
Yes.
Now, if I hadn't sold my apartment and I'd still been in Richmond, the situation would have been the same. It would have been an hour drive away, and I probably would never have gone. So, yeah, that was quite ironic that she was contacting me at this time of where I was at in my journey. And I found that space to be really good for me. I would just go for a 2 hour session and really started to do a lot of meditating, a lot of praying that whatever was going to be, but that I would be accepting of it. Yeah, so I actually started going to that center like every day. I went every day for about three or 4 weeks, and then I dropped it back, and I was going a couple of times a week. And so there was probably a gap of about 2.5 to nearly 3 months before I had surgery. And I really took that time to just work on myself and where I was emotionally and mentally with this. But during that time, I started to notice that the tumor to me felt like it was smaller.
Before you go into that,
Yeah.
can we talk about the gap between the last podcast, October 23, selling your apartment, and the experience that you had of selling your apartment and then places just not landing?
Yeah.
I think that's all part of this process that led to the scalar. And we often talk about this magic and the energy and the signs and serendipity that are happening around us that let us know that we are supported, even when we are feeling these challenges. So you
Yeah.
sold your
Well,
apartment.
yeah, selling my apartment was a real challenge in that the market was not great in Victoria, and so the inquiry levels were low. And the 4 week campaign, where the weekend there was meant to be the auction, they decided to cancel the auction because they just didn't feel like they had any firm buyers. And so they cancelled the auction but still did the open. And a young guy came through and put in an offer within an hour of leaving the inspection. And the offer was good. I went back to him with a counter offer. He accepted that. And yeah, the offer was great. but the terms for me weren't great. He wanted to settle in 30 days. And I kept saying to the agent, I don't think I can be out in 30 days. I just don't think I can do it. And anyway, he wouldn't actually budge on that. And so I either accepted the offer or I went back to private sale, and I didn't really want to do that either. So I accepted the offer. I got some help in to pack and really got out of there with actually nowhere to go. And I was tossing up, do I just go rent something? Because there wasn't enough time to buy anything. But rentals were really tough at that time as well. Because I was moving Bayside, it was the height of summer, our busiest time in rentals. Every rental open for inspection I went to, there were like 30 plus people there. And I just really couldn't find a property that was right for me. Or if I found something that was right, for whatever reason, I just didn't get it. And
Mm.
so, yeah, that 30 days was spent packing, looking at properties, packing, looking at properties. And at the end, I just had to put all my things in storage. And I went to stay with my daughter and her husband, who ironically were in a similar position of looking for a permanent rental and were in an Airbnb. And in the first few days that I was there, they said, look, we've decided we're going to move up to Byron. There's nothing here for us to rent, and we want to try that out. So again, I was just thrown into this, oh my God, what the hell am I going to do? And yeah, I remember feeling actually really, at the time, I just felt I was just being deserted by everything. And I got a severe ear infection, and I ended up at the eye and ear hospital. They actually, it's suspected they ruptured my eardrum while they were trying to look at it. I was in excruciating pain, and then ended up at another emergency doctor. Yeah, I was very sick. They had me on very strong antibiotics. And anyway, during those few days, I was chatting to a friend of mine who lived Bayside, and she kindly said, listen, just come and stay with me. Don't rush into a rental property. Don't rush into anything. Just come and stay with me. I've got the room. So I accepted that offer, which turned out me living there for 3 months, 3 months, and and actually it was great. Her and I actually had a really great time, and I think I helped her in ways being there, and she definitely helped me. And so it gave me the breathing space to look at both rentals and properties for sale. And I felt like my heart was telling me to find a property to buy, not
Mm,
rent.
and the other thing that we came up with around this period of time is you are a very independent person. You have
Yeah.
being able to work hard and put your head down and supporting your family. And if people haven't listened to this, for the first episode that we recorded, that you were actually widowed with 3 children at the age of 23,
Yeah.
quite young, and you raised them, you worked, and you provided. And I know, I know two of them really well,
Yes.
and you've raised really amazing humans in this world. And so you're very used to doing things on your own.
Yeah. And I
It's not
did.
like a real call of just leaning into support for family, support
Yeah.
from
It's,
friends.
I think this whole journey, Jin, has really taught me to let go of that control and that having to deal with everything myself, and to lean in on help from others. 2.5 years in, and I still don't find it easy. It's still something that I struggle with, but I think that's more just out of habit, you know. So I'm getting better at it, and
Yeah.
trying to just let it happen, whatever's meant to be.
Mm.
So yeah, I looked at lots of properties. I had one property that I was back and forwards on. And originally I wanted like a standalone villa unit, and everything I looked at was just going above what I could afford. So I
I
started
went
looking
I
at
remember
apartments.
with this, we were talking about the masculine push of,
Yes,
okay, and I was like, Susan, if this one doesn't go through, I want you to just take a step back,
yes,
not be in the doing. And I think I got you to create a desire statement, which is something we've been reviewing
yes,
lately.
yeah,
And that desire statement was that by a certain date, you were going to have a house, or it was in your vision. You talked about wanting the villa and
yes,
close to the water and walking distance to the shops and so on. But there was this thought that it was impossible. And I say, the more impossible the vision sounds, the better. And just write it down. What if the
yeah.
universe actually delivers? Then,
And then, yeah, so I looked at a few properties. I did bid on one apartment, which I absolutely loved. Like I just fell in love with it, but missed out on that apartment. And then I'd been to look at this villa with my friend Pat, and it had a great outdoor area and was fabulous, but I felt the villa itself was too small. And so I just dismissed it straight away. And then Pat was away, and I was looking at what auctions were on, what opens, and that villa was being auctioned. And it was the Friday before, and I thought, oh, I just contact that agent, have a look at the contract. And so I asked her to send me the contract. And I didn't actually get a chance to read it that day. And I drove up to watch the auction. I'm sitting on the fence reading the contract on my phone. And the agent turned up to put all her signs out. And she introduced herself to me and she said, oh, you're the person who wanted the contract late. And I said, oh, yeah, look, I'm probably not going to bid. I'm just looking to see what result you get. And I came in to have a look at the unit and I walked around and I thought, this unit actually probably isn't too bad. It's actually not that bad. And I sat out in the backyard in the sun for a bit while they had their auction. There was a lot of people here. And anyway, the auction started and yeah, no one bid. And they did a vendor bid. And it was like, wow, that's under my budget. And so I bid. And no one else bid, so they did another vendor bid. And then I bid again. And then it was passed in to me. And I was like, oh, I was actually like, oh, shit. And they're like, come inside. And the process is come inside and we'll see if we can negotiate to get back up to the reserve that the owners wanted. And so they brought me in and sat me in the lounge room, and then the owners were out the back and they went out talking to the owners. And so I'm texting the kids going, oh, I might have actually bought a unit. And the kids are
yeah.
like all texting back, what? Where? And so I'm sending them the address, and my son's, oh, that's such a good spot, Mum. And they're obviously looking it up on the internet and they're all texting me things about it. And anyway, I'm, oh, this was my offer. I don't know how much more to offer and blah. It was really quite funny.
Oh,
And
I
then
know.
the agent come in and anyway, we negotiated an offer and I came up a bit and they accepted that offer. And yeah, I bought the unit. And
How does it feel going back to this story and this feeling? What's happening in your body?
oh, it just feels really funny to me because
Yeah.
it's like the other two properties that I'd really looked at, I did, I just did so much background work on them. And like here I was buying a unit and I hadn't really done any background work on it.
Yeah. Just going off
And
the feeling.
I just trusted my gut. And whilst I still felt it was a bit small inside, it just had so many other things and it ticked so many other boxes. And yeah, so I went away, signed all the contracts, went away. I came back later that afternoon and I parked my car in the street and I thought, I'm going to see the two things that I really wanted was to be walking distance to the shops and walking distance to the beach. So off I set on foot and timed it. And it was a 10-minute walk to the shops, the main shopping strip, and then another 5 minutes on from there to the beach. And I sat at the beach and I went, yeah, this is right. This is just where I need to be. And yeah, and it has. It's been great. And it's out of all the things in that vision that I said about the house, this really ticked all the boxes.
Yeah, and that's how
And
we knew it was in alignment, even though it didn't quite make sense
yeah,
or follow the same process that you think most people would take. And I didn't think we were going to cover this story, but it was just reminding me, oh, hang on,
yeah,
we've got this gap to fill. And in the meantime, your tumor's growing
yes,
over this period of time. And there was a lot of challenges, but there was a lot of magic. And I love
yes,
that you get to come back to this feeling. And I hope you've documented it as a milestone in
yes.
your journey, because it's that whole thing of push, but when things are meant to land, when we get aligned with our vision, it will start to attract it. Our work is about becoming energetically aligned.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the juxtapose of the position of where I was, like on one hand, I was really struggling with decisions on the treatments and where I needed to be and had all of that going on. But on the other hand, I was finding joy and fun in this process of creating a vision and then watching some of those things in that vision unfold.
Yeah,
And
duality.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, it is funny to look back at actually at some of the things. It is in general, just looking back at life and how I handled things in the past and how I handled things, probably in the last, especially year and a half, very different. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Because I'm wondering, is there anything that you would have changed about that process? Because I believe that the process of looking for the house after selling, the gap that you were thrown into, we
Mm.
can also draw that as an analogy for lots of things in your life with
Yes.
treatment and relationships and so
Yeah.
on. Is there, on reflection, with that experience, anything that you would change how you've approached it for future? Because we know that these sort of patterns are going to repeat themselves.
Yeah. I think probably the only thing that I would change is give myself a bit more time to move out and decide where I was going to go. Now, would a longer settlement have changed anything? No, probably not,
Mm.
because it took me a lot longer to find a property and work out where I actually wanted to be anyway. But the pressure of that was pretty immense, actually. To pack up your life, to not have, and for me especially, like I had no access to any of my treatment
Oh,
equipment.
that's right. That, yeah, you had to
Yeah. And
surrender
and
that
and
as
part of
well.
that was a big stress for me because I just thought, you just put it in storage. It'll only be a couple of weeks. I'll find something. And that didn't happen. And so, yeah, I had to outsource a lot of the things that I was doing, which was expensive. But look, looking back, I got through all of that and I handled it and I was no worse off for it.
Mm,
But yeah, maybe just not put that much pressure on myself
mm,
and
mm.
try and do it all in 30 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time and space and expanding and then trusting that something's going to land.
Well, but it's also goes back to, Jim, we talk a lot about giving yourself space for things to happen.
Yeah.
And I think the way I had to move so quickly, I just didn't have that space. I didn't
Yeah.
have the space to think clearly about it. I went back and forwards from rentals to buying to rental to buying. And I think that was because I didn't have the space and I was trying to force something to happen
Mm, yeah.
to make the process easier.
Okay. So
Um,
that fills in that little gap.
yeah.
And you were the EE scaler, you'd settled into your new home now,
Well, also when I
started to
moved,
shrink.
I'd actually started looking at an online business.
Oh, yeah.
And so 2 weeks after I moved into this place, I went to Japan for,
Oh, that's right. Yes, because we talked about I want to travel. And so
yeah,
then you were starting to think about renovating. Susan, can you just go and book this holiday first?
yes.
Do something for yourself. But it
Well,
was great
I had
online business.
this opportunity arose to go to Japan. There was a conference celebrating this company's 50-year anniversary. And at this point, I worked with some other ladies, but I'd never actually personally met them. I'd only ever spoken to them online in our team meetings. And three of them were going to Japan for this conference. And so I just said, oh, could I come? And they were like, oh, gosh, yes, definitely come.
And it was quite
Uh,
foreign for you to do something like that, travel
yeah,
with
very
we
foreign.
don't know.
Yeah, very foreign. And I let them handle booking the accommodation, other than the accommodation in Tokyo when we got there and Tokyo when we came home. And because I was actually really in the thick of trying to work out my treatments and things like that and what was going on, and I actually think I either had this breast scan that showed the tumor growing just before but hadn't had the results, or just when I got back. But anyway, at that point, I knew I could feel that tumor had grown. Like I could just feel it. But I was still trying to trust that maybe it wasn't what I was thinking it was. And yeah, I headed to Japan and with people I didn't know from Bar Soap, and they all live in other states, so I didn't meet them till we landed in Tokyo. And that in itself really took me out of my comfort zone and was a completely new experience for me. And yeah, there were a couple of times where it was challenging, but all in all, like they were really lovely. They were really accepting of me, and it was a really great experience. I love Japan, and it was really nice to get away and just be in the situation that I was in and deal with the day-to-day things that were coming up and just enjoyed myself in the process. So yeah, so that was fun. But of course, yeah, I
I
came
love
back.
that you did that because a lot of people wouldn't travel because it means having to let go of their treatments as
Yeah.
well and some of the things that you've invested in. But maybe this whole process of moving and having all your stuff in storage was setting you up for the freedom of travel as well. Because we often talk about being in joy and new experiences and how that contributes to your health as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a big part of it. And I think you're right, that break that I had where I couldn't just do my routine every day, all day that I'd been doing for 18 months, that break was really quite good because it did show me that I didn't have to be so regimented,
Mm.
that I could take a break and the world wasn't going to fall apart. And so, yeah, so it was good. I still did some things, but predominantly, yeah, that was probably the first time I really did nothing
Mm. So
at all.
you came back, and then this is where you found the EE scalar and things
Yeah.
actually started to shrink for you.
Yeah. So during that 2.5 months before, or nearly 3 months before surgery, I started to feel the tumor shrinking. And
What do you think was getting it to shrink? Was it the EE scalar? Were the space and mindset you were in?
to be honest, I don't know, because there were probably three things at the time that had changed for me.
What were they?
One was I was doing a lot more mindset work
Mm.
and work on my emotions around this whole situation I was in. I was doing the EE system and I had increased my I had increased my dosage of the ivermectin. And
Okay.
they were really the only things that I did. And I live on my own. And so it's not like I had a partner who I could say, can you feel this tumor? Do you think it's, I'm just imagining it. And so this was going through my mind as I was getting closer to the surgery.
Mm,
And part of me was dismissing it, I think, because every time I mentioned it to the breast surgeon, she dismissed it.
mm,
And she was very non-committal. I said, should I have another scan? She didn't think it was necessary. So I just thought, what is this just my mind playing tricks with me because I'm getting closer to surgery and you've done all this work to get yourself into a place of acceptance. And I was in a place of acceptance. I was feeling quite calm about it. And I'd done all my research about the procedure that I'd chosen to have. And it wasn't a simple procedure. My reconstruction was using my own stomach fat, and that's a whole nother surgery, abdominal surgery, which is quite extensive. And but I'd really come to terms with it, and I'd spoken to other people that had the surgery, and yeah, I felt quite comfortable. Whereas in the past, anything else that I had questioned like this, I had really just pushed and demanded, give, I want a scan or I want this. And
mm,
this time I didn't. And yeah, I don't know whether that was because I didn't want to upset the equilibrium of where I was at because it
mm.
had taken me so much work to get there. And I didn't give it much thought, to be honest. I went into surgery and I had some interesting things happen that morning driving to
Oh,
surgery.
yes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I drove myself into the hospital. My daughter was meeting me there, and then she was going to take my car. And I got up, I walked the dog, and then threw all my stuff in the car and off I went. And I just, for some reason, I don't know, just went to Spotify and hit my playlist. And some time ago, I'd had a medium reading by a lovely lady, Michelle. And in that reading, my mum had come through and my first husband had come through. And both of them had given her a song that they wanted her to tell me that I needed to listen to. And I'd saved both of those songs in my playlist somewhere. And so I just hit playlist randomly. And the first song that came on was my mum's song. And I was like, wow, that's so
Because it had
bizarre.
never come up prior, had it?
No,
Even that was on
no,
your
it
playlist.
had never ever started prior. And generally, whenever I hit that playlist, it used to go back to the first song, like it'd
Yeah.
start and then randomly go from there. But it started on her song. And I was like, that's so weird. And the other thing that was weird is that my surgery was quite delayed. Most people would have gone in and had that, been booked into that surgery for 2 weeks, but I had delayed it. And so when they gave me a date for surgery, ironically, that date was my mum's birthday.
Yeah.
So I was like, so she'd been on my mind that morning because it would have been her birthday. And then this song came up, and I was like, wow. And I felt quite peaceful about it. And then just as I was, the next song that came on, like this sort of was when I was went, what is going on? Was that song my husband had asked me, had wanted the medium to give me to listen to.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, no way. Like this, how does this, it just really blew me away. And so,
Yeah. I remember getting the message from you, and that's one of the patterns I see for you when you say you'll never guess what. That's what we joke about
yeah,
in our groups. When Susan messages me saying you'll never guess what, she's seen her sign, something crazy's happened. I've bought a house, like I've bought a book.
yeah. So
Wow. But how did you feel?
Like I just actually felt at peace. I felt like that was a sign that I guess that I wasn't alone in this and that everything would be okay. And
Mm,
so, yeah, got admitted and I had this consultation with a professor, an English professor who was helping me with medications and things, but more so after surgery. And he had said to me, if you can meditate for 20 minutes before they start the surgery, it really helps with the risk of loss of blood and because it slows down all your blood flow. And so they had me on a table outside the surgery theatre for quite some time doing, I don't know what they were doing. So I just closed my eyes and started meditating. And I'd been meditating for about 20 minutes or so, and then the anaesthetist come out with his assistant and they take my blood pressure and he's, oh, wow, we've got a relaxed one here. He goes, wow, we never see this. This is amazing. And he's getting his assistant to come over and have a look at the reading. Have a look. He's, wow, that's great. Gee, you're calm. And I just smiled and I didn't really say anything. And yeah, it was funny. So I just went into surgery like that. And I did feel really calm. And the surgery actually took 7 hours. And so it was quite a long time and a long time before I'd come out of recovery back to my room. And I don't really remember actually waking up in recovery, but when I woke up back in my room, I was like really alert and my daughter was there and I'm chatting away to her and saying, oh, can you get me a water? I'm thirsty. And yeah, it was really just the start of a very good and easy recovery for me. The next day, I felt a bit nauseous in the morning and they thought it was one of the painkillers going through the drip. So they stopped that and said, we need to get a doctor to get us something else. But really, by the time the doctor come around, I was like, I'm fine. So they didn't give me anything else. Physio came in to get me to sit up in bed. I asked, could I get out of bed? And they were like, yeah, sure. And then when I continued to stay out of bed and I was fine, and I asked, could I get my laptop out of my bag? And I wanted to do some work. The head physio said, oh, wow, we've never seen anyone get out of bed and actually stay out of bed after this surgery. You're the first. And they were writing on the board, she's the first.
Yeah,
And
it's an incredible recovery and so
yeah,
many
I sat
people
out of
coming.
bed for 2 hours and then they got me back into bed. I was up. I then asked for the catheter to come out because it was uncomfortable. They didn't have a problem doing that. They were saying things to me like, wow, are you drinking a lot of water? And I wasn't. Overnight, I was having a sip, but I'd taken in my own hydrogen water and I'd have a sip each time they woke me up, which was every half an hour through the night. And the nurses said, your urine just looks so good. I don't think you actually need this in. And so they took that out, which then meant I could go and have a shower, which I did. And the second day, the physio came in and would you like to hop out of bed? And I said, oh, I've already been out of bed several times. I've been up to the toilet. And she was just like, she goes, what? And I said, yeah, no, I'm fine. Oh, okay, let's go for a walk up the passage. And I said, yep, sure. So I got out of bed and look, yes, I was stiff and I was sore, but I walked up the passage and she brought me back and she just goes, no physio needed, nothing needed for this one. She's perfectly fine. And I was, and it was a weekend then. Oh, the third day was a weekend. And so they kept me there till Monday morning, let me go home. And I think I went back to see the plastic surgeon on the Friday. And I said to him, what's the reason that I can't drive? Because I was out walking every day with the dog. And yes, I was definitely slower and I had to rest more. But I wasn't on any painkillers, wasn't on any medication. And he just said, look, he said, yes, normally, yeah, you wouldn't be driving. Most people would not be able to drive because of movement. But he said, you're actually fine. You can
Mm.
drive. And
He was amazed as well at your recovery, wasn't he?
yeah, he was just amazed. And the nurse kept saying every time I saw her, because I saw them like every week, just at how quickly I was healing and how good everything looked. And so, look, I was very grateful for that. And because I was aware that not everyone has that progress in healing. And
And what do you think contributed to it?
to be honest, I think just probably my lifestyle and leading up to it. And a lot of what I do revolves around detoxing my body. And so I believe that I had minimal inflammation going into that surgery. And even though that surgery would have caused a lot of inflammation in my body, I came home and I continued doing treatments to help get rid of that inflammation out of my body. And I just think that was a major factor.
Mm.
And yeah, yeah, I think that's really what it was. And coming home, it was quite important for me to be able to get back into some of these therapies to continue detoxing my body after being under an anesthetic for 7 hours. I had read prior to surgery that it can take 9 months to get an anesthetic out of your system.
Mm.
And the one thing that I did probably struggle with the most actually after this surgery, and I'm still struggling a bit because I've had now a second surgery, is brain fog.
Mm.
Tiredness and brain fog. I had a lot of that. Even though I felt well,
That's right. You couldn't quite motivate yourself to act on anything.
no, it's just really just lethargic all the time. And I got to a point where I stopped fighting that and just went with the flow because nothing I was doing was getting rid of it. And it,
Yeah, the doing kind of, I want this to
yeah,
go away versus surrender. And we often talk about the quicker we can truly surrender and be at peace with it, actually, the faster we'll move through it.
I think so. And I think when I did that, I started to move faster through it. And but I rested more. And maybe that's all it was. I just had to rest. And I think because my mindset has always been, I'm a doer, I
Mm.
get things done. And because I physically felt like I could do things, I was just doing things. And so after this second surgery, which was a much smaller surgery, but ironically, I was so much sorer after it than I was the first surgery. I really just let myself rest. When I was tired, I just let myself rest. And I think I've recovered from that tiredness a lot quicker
Mm.
than what I did the first time.
Can we talk about the findings of after they did
Yeah,
the mastectomy, the size of the tumor?
yeah,
Yeah, it's all very interesting because, as you say, it's like the one time that you didn't really push for anything.
yeah.
So, what did they find after they did the?
Yeah, so 2 days after surgery, my breast surgeon came in, not the plastic surgeon, but the breast surgeon. And she just had this really worried look on her face. And I was thinking, sitting in bed and thinking, what is going on? And she made a bit of small talk, which didn't really make any sense to me. And I'm just sitting there smiling. And she said, oh, look, I've got your pathology results. And I didn't go straight to how something's wrong because honestly, really didn't think there'd be anything wrong. And so I just looked at her with a, I don't know, strange look on my face. And she said, oh, it seems that those scans that you had in Queensland were extremely out with their measurements of what the mass was. And I said, oh. And she said, yeah. She said, pathology has shown that the mass was only 2 centimeters.
And they said it was 5 centimeters
Yeah.
on the stick.
And I just sat with that, and she could not get out of the room quick enough. Like she didn't even really stay around for me to answer anything. And I sat there and I went, and I went over what she said, and I thought, hang on, this cannot be a mismeasurement from the scans I had in Queensland, because she had me have two further scans before deciding on the surgery, and one was a mammogram and one was an ultrasound. And both of those had shown exactly the same thing. And that's when I was given the ultimatum that a mastectomy was all I could have done. And then I went to, oh, how do I actually feel about this? Because I knew that if it was only, if the whole mass, so they were talking about the change cells and the tumour, if that was only 2 centimetres, then I actually could have had a lumpectomy,
Yeah.
not a mastectomy. And I didn't actually feel angry, and I made the conscious choice that I was not going to let this consume me,
Mm.
because there was nothing I could do at that point to change what had happened.
Mm.
And I wasn't going to let that affect my recovery, or the fact that the results of the pathology, they were great. It was only 2 centimetres. They did get clear margins. I did have nothing in my lymph nodes. And so those results were worth celebrating. And it was funny when I told each of my kids the pathology results, their first reaction was, "Oh my God, are you so angry about that?"
Mm.
And I said, "Well, actually, no, because what's the point?
Yeah.
There's just no point of being angry about it." And as time went on, were there days where I thought, where I questioned myself as to why I didn't push to have those scans? Sure, of course there was. But I didn't dwell on that either,
Yeah.
because there was nothing that I could do to change the situation I was in, and I was determined to make the best of that situation. And
Mm.
and I think I did. My healing, I think, showed that, and my process through that healing. I had one complication, which was a seroma under my arm, where a sac of fluid builds. I had some nerve pain down that arm and numbness all at the back of my arm, where they said was nerve damage, and they didn't know whether that would ever improve itself. But I started asking around and asking people about, were there people that could help me with things like that, nerve damage? And I was eventually put on to a lady who is an osteo but specializes in only working on women who have had mastectomies. And so I started seeing her, and like her reaction when she first saw me was just utter shock at my movement, at basically everything, at the stage of where I was at after
As in,
surgery.
like you were so far along. Or
Oh, no, she said she'd never seen anyone that had that movement. Like my movement was back to normal.
mm.
And she actually said that she had never seen anyone at
Mm.
that point of their, yeah, at that time after their surgery, that was basically moving normal and doing everything that I was doing. She was just shocked. And ironically, she told me, she asked my story about my treatment and what I'd done leading up to this and all of that. And she was quite shocked that I hadn't done any chemo or radiation. And she announced to me that she basically believed in conventional
Mm.
treatment. And I said, "Oh, that's okay. I don't care what you believe in, but this is what I chose to do." And after looking at me, then at that point, she hadn't looked at me, she hadn't moved me, hadn't done anything. And then after that she treated me, she said, I have to thank you because in 1 hour you have taught me so much more about what can be done in this situation and how beneficial it clearly is for your body. And she's so interested in my journey that for my second surgery, she asked, could she come to the surgery? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I don't care. If the surgeon doesn't care, I don't care. Like, I'll be asleep. And she's explained it that she'd actually been in and seen a mastectomy done, but she'd never seen the final surgery. And anyway, so the surgeon agreed to her coming in. So she was there, all smiles and waving to me as they wheeled me into theatre. Yeah, and I haven't seen her yet because I don't see her for 6 weeks after surgery, but she sent me a message to thank me and said she had learnt so much and it was so beneficial to watch, to helping her when she's helping women. And yeah, she's done a lot to help me, and I don't have any of that nerve pain now, and I've got a slight bit of numbness, but nothing that worries me. And yeah, I
I
just,
am going to ask you for all these links. Some of them I know about so that I can put them in the show notes because people are probably going to say, who did you see, Susan, if you had
yes,
great results?
sure.
And it's interesting because I love you sharing your story. That's why I'm getting you a second time round on here because I know that you've been very courageous in sharing your journey on social media, but we only see the snippets. So this is really the behind the scenes of
Yeah,
what else was going on in my life that's almost too hard to put in a caption or a few
yes,
words. And I really feel like your story does open people's minds to what's possible, but also lets them know the commitment and the work that is
yeah,
involved, and sometimes the challenge of choosing the path that you actually desire and holding
yeah,
the duality of I get to have these highs, these celebrations, and step into new things that feel uncomfortable, but this is how my life is unfolding. And so, yeah, keep sharing your message. We're not done yet, but I that was the part that I really wanted to get to because you had a brief moment of no evidence of disease, and then it was
yeah,
that MRI, and intuitively you actually felt, oh, it isn't gone. And we did
yeah,
record that podcast. You'd sold your apartment. There was a bit of stress involved with that. It started growing, and then there was all these interesting things falling into place that it was undeniable that this is the path you're meant to take. And just being at peace with maybe if I had have pushed and maybe if they had have listened to me, because you did raise it quite a few times.
yeah,
I feel like it
yeah,
was that it has shrunk. It could have gone a different pathway, but you're very accepting of this pathway very quickly when someone could go into anger and it could actually negatively impact them from holding on to that. So, can you speak to that? And just because of some situations, we won't be mentioning any names, but speaking
mm,
to the energetics and how you've experienced this and what's gone through your mind.
yeah. Look, I guess the one thing I can say is when you choose the path that I chose, it's not simple, and trying to find practitioners is extremely hard. And that's on both sides of the fence, on the integrative side and on the conventional side. It's really hard. And I think because I did a bit of both, no one works with anyone in a certain degree because the conventional side don't believe in the integrative side, or they don't want to know about it. I don't know. I don't. My oncologist told me it was that because it wasn't standard of care, she couldn't really speak to me about it. So yeah, it's meant that I've had, oh, like now, for instance, I don't have a practitioner right now. And I haven't had an integrative doctor probably for a few months.
And it's not necessarily because of out of your choice of
No.
starting to end. It's just that they've gone off on their different pathways, different things have
Yeah.
happened in their life.
Yeah. Certain things have happened and it's certainly not been my choice. And so I've been continuing on the protocol since surgery, the repurposed drug protocol. I chose not to do the drug recommendation from my oncologist. because it was chemo and Herceptin. And she's also now basically told me that she doesn't really see any point in me continuing to see her because she's not doing anything with me. Yeah, I don't really have anyone at the moment.
Mm.
Um,
It's
and
interesting. How do you feel about that? Like your oncologist sort of implying that she doesn't need to, doesn't want to see you, not
yeah,
having these integrative doctors. How are you navigating this?
I think with my oncologist, I must admit, I felt like I'd just been dismissed, and that made me angry because I thought, well, you've seen my progress in this last 2.5 years, but you are now just saying, see you later. Thanks for the last 2.5 years, but I'm done. But then when I stopped and thought about it, I thought, what do I need to see her for right now?
Mm.
I don't need her for scans, which is what most people who no evidence of disease, they continue to see their oncologist have regular scans, and that's all the oncologist really does. Some people do go on their drugs for another 12 months after surgery, and that would definitely be a reason to keep seeing her. But I really sat and just went, why do I need to see her? Like, why does that bother me? And yeah, I just thought, I I I don't actually need to see it, so why am I even pushing for that?
Yeah, it's funny. I love that you actually have the time, space, and capacity to actually contemplate that
Mm,
rather than, oh, I've just got to see someone else, like looking at why are these people dropping away from,
yeah,
and am I able to loosen my grip on what once served me at a certain point on my journey?
yeah. I think I've definitely come to that point with the oncologist at this stage, but then I still feel like I need to find a doctor because, for instance, I've just got some blood tests back, don't really understand them. One of them's quite a complex test that measures your circulating tumour cells. And yeah, so I get things like that. And then I'm like, okay, you know what, I can't interpret this. And I've been able to speak to the doctor who's running a research program, um, and it's a research program on this actual particular blood test. And I'm very grateful that she was willing to talk to me and have a look at my tests, and she has. But even after that conversation, that has confirmed for me that yeah, I do need to have a doctor telling me if there's something I need to change in this protocol moving forward. Because one of the very first things I learnt when I started this journey is that the tumor that you have been diagnosed is just one part of this cancer journey. And the other part is the cancer stem cells, circulating cancer stem cells. And it's astounding to me that in 2.5 years, my oncologist has never mentioned circulating cancer stem cells. But it is circulating cancer stem cells that give you cancer somewhere else. So secondary somewhere else. It's not the tumor per se. And chemo, radiation, and surgery do nothing for circulating cancer stem cells. Surgery, whilst I've had surgery and the results from pathology were great, there is no guarantee that I'm not going to have cancer somewhere else. I don't believe people get cancer back. I think they always probably had it somewhere else. It just wasn't detectable.
A lot of people think once I've had the treatment, once I've had the surgery, I will be okay. And it does take you advocating for yourself and being willing to explore this pathway, which can sometimes open up quite a bit for you to explore.
Yeah,
And I think most people have the resistance to the lifestyle changes, or sometimes there's this denial. And I know that I experienced that when my health went downhill, is I don't actually want to go to the doctor. I don't want this
yeah,
test to confirm this. What if it's high? What if it's low?
yeah.
Then just planting of the seed of how the practitioner then delivers that information.
Oh, look, very much. There is a part of you that just says, I'll just go on my merry way and not get tested. And you mentioned that I have my Instagram page, and I get contacted from people daily asking me questions about my journey. And the amount of people that say to me, oh, I'm meant to have a scan, but I don't want to have it. I don't
And
want
you're
to
like, gosh,
know.
there's so much more behind that
Yeah.
decision.
And yeah, there's definitely so much more behind it. But it's like, whereas I think I'm a bit the opposite. I believe that knowledge is power. And I think in this circumstance, like I do believe that there's so many things out there that will help lower your tumor cell count. I do believe that. And I don't believe that just if my count is higher than what I'd like it to be, that means I'm going to get cancer. I actually don't feel that. But I do believe that it's something I need to keep an eye on. And I need to now navigate, okay, what do I do about that? I've done all the research on dealing with the tumor and trying to keep those circulating stem cells in check. But I've realized that I haven't done anything about, okay, now the tumor's gone. Now what should my protocol look like?
Having a baby, you have the baby, and then there's all these years of
Yeah.
postpartum period, and no one really plans for that apart from
No.
birth.
And that's sort of me at the moment. And so it's okay, I do need to find a doctor who aligns with me and my belief and says, okay, yeah, here, this is what I think we need to do. And we'll keep a track on it with these blood tests. And yeah, so that's where I'm at now. And it's quite an it can be quite a scary feeling to not have a practitioner at hand.
Well,
Um,
maybe just by you putting this out there, because we talk a lot about you speaking things out, the solutions land, there's an energetic vibration
yeah,
frequency, and maybe someone knows of someone that they could recommend you in Australia, or at the moment you're based in Melbourne, so we can put it
yeah,
up there on this podcast as well. Because I do really feel like you're in this place of being able to attract the right support. And we know that this journey in all facets of life requires us to be able to let go of certain
yeah,
relationships and also attract the new ones into our life. I've got a
yeah,
couple more questions for you that
yeah.
I know I want you to share on. This one's just come up, and maybe we spoke about it the first round, but you have a lot of people contacting you, and you've done a lot of emotional and manifestation work with me,
Mhm.
and you're very good at picking up on energy. What would you say about, yeah, can you speak a bit about the emotional work and what it's meant for you, how it's played out for you over the last couple of years and will continue to play out for you based
Yeah.
on what you hear from people who are approaching you?
Wow. I think firstly from people approaching me, it's interesting how attuned I am to picking up what's going on for them emotionally without even knowing them. You just being able to understand that, gee, there's so much emotional stuff going on there with you, even though I don't know you, I can just pick it up in your language, in what you're saying, in your words, in your comments. And I think I said in my first podcast, I knew that past traumas and stress in my life were affecting my health. I knew that before I got cancer. and but I just didn't know how to fix it. And finding your work and how I found your work was listening to a podcast with another girl who had breast cancer, and it just resonated with me. It was like the first thing that I just went, that's what I need. I need someone to give me a tool to recognize what's going on with me emotionally and how that's affecting my body, and then how to deal with that. And I simplify it by saying to people that you go to a psychologist or psychiatrist, you sit, you talk for an hour, you feel a sense of relief because you've cried, you've let out emotions, but you walk out of that office with no tools on how to deal with day-to-day life. And as I guess what we've talked about today has shown, that life is always going to throw up things. That's life, that's part of life. And it's about knowing how to deal with those things when they come up. And I've been lucky enough to continue working with you. And so when I've gone off track and haven't been able to get past seeing what I need to do to release those emotions and yeah, deal with how I'm feeling and how it's affecting my body, I've had you there. But I think bit by bit, I'm recognizing that in myself so much sooner.
You are.
And being able to give myself the space to contemplate it and to say, okay, why am I doing that? Or it might be a feeling in my body that I feel like, oh, I've got pain down my leg, which is a sign, or lower back pain.
Mm.
I recognize these things now as signs of my lower back pain and pain down my leg is usually family conflict. And it's recognizing that and then going, okay, now how am I going to deal with that? And the last few months, I've got a lot into meditation and I guess just giving myself the time to actually feel those feelings. It's not about not getting angry and not getting sad and not crying or not laughing or not having fun. It's about feeling it all.
Yeah, and you've shared
And
that with us beautifully today on the podcast. It's not about
yeah,
being perfect. And
look,
sometimes you recognize when you share the story, it's like, oh, there's still emotion there. And actually, this is part of the processing.
it is. And I think some people will look at that emotion and say, and I've had someone say it to me actually, you clearly haven't come to terms with it.
Mm.
And I don't believe that actually. I believe I have come to terms with it, but it is still an emotion. It's still an emotion inside me that I think will be inside me for some time, because I think the side of this surgery is sold to you as a quick fix. Yep, let's just take your whole breast and it'll be fixed and you'll go on and you won't have cancer. And that isn't the case. So many women have mastectomies and then 2 years, 5 years, 10 years get cancer back in their breast.
Yeah.
And when I asked my surgeon about that, before I agreed to have the surgery, I actually asked her that question. If this is such a necessity and this is the thing that's going to cure me, I said to her, can you answer two questions? One, why do you then put me on drugs for 12 months afterwards? And two, why do so many women get cancer back after having a mastectomy?
Mm.
And she looked at me and she said, because there's no guarantee. I said, exactly. So stop selling it as a guarantee.
I find it so interesting that there are some but not many. And in this case, that they don't take into account or share, well, emotional stress,
No.
physiological stress, emotional stress,
Yeah.
because that's where I struggle with people calling on evidence and studies, is because they're very quantitative. I'm a little bit out of practice with all of this.
Yeah.
I just wonder, how can they actually collect these results when they're not fully taking into consideration someone's background, upbringing, conditioning,
Yeah.
emotional environment that can create the foundation for how someone heals or the complications
Yeah.
they have. And these are just the stories that we hear, but we're getting more and more evidence through these stories.
I think, you know what, there are places that are doing a lot more studies on this now because the link between your emotions and especially certain types of cancer is just undeniable. And there are definitely studies being done. Most integrative clinics now, it's like on the number one on of the list of what you've got to deal with if you choose to go through that clinic.
It's interesting because you've gone overseas to
Yes.
some really expensive places, and a lot of the people you have dealt with have spoken about emotions, but
Mhm.
haven't really, it's been up to you to go and find this work
Yeah.
to do.
Oh, and I think that's also the problem with in Australia. I actually know of one clinic now that's starting that emotional work is a big part of what they're doing in Australia. But when I was diagnosed, there wasn't anywhere. And whilst going overseas taught me a lot, I still had to come back and find practitioners to work with me in all those avenues.
Yeah.
And I've, you know, a lot of us from Australia that went to the clinic that I went to have now joined a WhatsApp group, and I am always sharing anything I find in Australia that's new that might help someone who's recently joined that group, who's in the situation that I was in 2.5 years ago, where you land back in Australia and the overwhelm of now trying to put all of what you've learned into practice. You need
Yeah.
to find equipment. You need to find practitioners that'll give you IVs. You need to find doctors that'll give you scripts. You need to find someone who works with you on the emotional side. And the
Mm.
stress in that alone is huge. And
It is really interesting because actually that's quite a challenging time for me to work with people when
yeah,
they've got not only the conventional, but all the alternative, all the integrative.
yeah,
It's in this state of overwhelm. And it's usually not when I would take people on,
yeah,
because they're still in this kind of fix it mode without really understanding. And it's almost like they've got to go through that and then still be left with,
yeah.
okay,
Well,
why is this not?
well, I think for me, you and I started working together when I was about 6 months into this journey. And I think that's because it took that long for me to have the space. And I was working with someone from Hope for Cancer remotely, but it took that long for me to have the space to see a post about a podcast and say, oh, I'm going to listen to that podcast.
Well, it was interesting because we talked about this on the first episode, how
Yeah,
your daughter actually sent you that podcast, but you didn't listen to it, but you had
yeah,
to come to it in your own timing. And then you're like, oh,
yes,
listen to this. She's like, Mum, that's the one that I was I
I
sent.
know. And I think that's this whole thing about giving yourself space. When you used to first talk to me about that, I used to think, what do you mean give myself space?
Yeah.
You might think, oh, I've got time. I'm in a sauna for an hour every day or every second day. I've got time. But the reality is when you're your own advocate, there's so much consuming your mind that sometimes you'll listen to a podcast and not really get anything out of it. And then you might come across that podcast again and not remember you even listened to it and put it on. Sometimes I'll be halfway through it and think, I've actually listened to this, but
Yeah.
this time I'm actually hearing it.
Yes, and you hear something different based on where
Yes,
you're at on your journey. Because we have talked a little bit about the energetics, which can be
yes,
very elusive and not feel like the right pathway for someone to go down when they're in very early stages of the pain and the fix it.
yes,
And so it is tough to watch, but the more I've gone on this journey myself, the more I've witnessed and walked the journey with people, I just say that's just where you've got to go, and I'll be here when you're ready to say
yeah,
yourself.
yeah. And I think that's also, there's a lot of acceptance that you need to find in yourself in that time as well. It's funny, this lady that I met the other day who, was diagnosed at stage 4, she she was asking me to detail sort of what I'd done. And a bit like when I first met you, when you asked me to talk about my life and give me a timeline of what I'd done, I really look back at those times and think, wow, how did I do all of that? I
Yeah.
live on my own. How did I juice every day, like fresh every day? How did I then make my
And
meal?
probably in a cold compress one that takes 10 times as
Yes,
long.
no. And how did I do this? And I don't know how I did it. I
Yeah.
did it, and I did it obviously. And for 12 months, I did that. I was so strict with my diet. I was so strict with my regime. And
And that's really a place that people come to. It's just, this is just taking up so much of my time, like a
yeah,
full-time job, caring for myself. Like, how do I
yeah,
continue to live this way? But also, what's happened is that you have dropped off or you've relaxed from some of
yes.
these protocols and diets and so on. Can
Well,
we?
I think it's like you said that somewhere in that process, and you know what, they said this at Hope for Cancer, my integrative doctor has said it, is that you still have to find joy in life. You
Yeah.
still have to live life. And it's like they used to say at Hope for Cancer, if you loved coffee before, you had to change your diet, just as an example. And every day you get up thinking about how you cannot have coffee and that
Mm,
stresses you out, that you are far better to have a coffee
yeah. And feel good.
than to deal with that stress.
Yeah.
And so it's finding that balance of, okay, you know what? Yes, I do need to make some radical changes. There's no doubt about that. But finding the balance that, you know what, having a coffee once a month because I'm out with my friends
Mm,
and I'm out having breakfast, and it is not going to affect what I'm doing. It is
yeah.
not going to be a big deal.
And
Or
something
choosing something that you can feel more comfortable with, because food's another big challenge that people have.
Yeah. And there's this, especially I see when people are trying to navigate their own journey, they then have this belief that coffee's bad for cancer
Mm.
or sugar's bad for cancer. And then they can't get it out of their mind to just enjoy it because it's then planted in the
Yes.
subconscious. So
Yeah.
this is again like, how do we feel about things? And
Yeah.
having someone question, like, hey, there's another way, or there's a way to work through this. So it is an ever evolving journey. Can we speak about some of the other things that have landed in your life that were once a big focus? And I'll give you a hint, money.
Oh, yeah. The one thing that I never thought I'd be learning about in this journey is about money. And it came up quite early with you and I working together. Just what a poor relationship I have had with money nearly probably most of my life. And for me, money was always scarce. And I guess I believed it was always scarce, actually. I shouldn't say it was always scarce because it actually wasn't. I've lived quite a good life, but I believed it was scarce. And I think that came from my childhood. My mum and dad had 8 children, they both had to work. Money was not free flowing. We weren't a wealthy family. And I think growing up in that environment and scarcity you just continue to do that. And it's funny because I remember always saying this to my children all the time when they were growing up. We moved to Melbourne, they started at a new school, and it was quite evident that a lot of the families at the school were what I thought was well off compared to me. And a lot of the mums didn't work, and just the husbands worked, and I worked full time. And I used to find the kids asking for things that they'd never asked for before. $150 pair of sand shoes. And I would just be like, no way. There's no way you're getting that. And I tell this story often. It was my son, who's my eldest, and he was an avid basketball player, loved any sport really. And he desperately wanted these U-Butte sand shoes. Like, he just wanted them. They were $150. And I said, I can't afford them. Now, I probably could have afforded them, but I didn't feel like I could afford them. And so in the end, I said to him, you've got money in the bank, so you go buy them yourself. So he did. Oh, and he was so proud of them. And then 6 months of playing 2 games of basketball a week and all his training and everything else, those shoes were ruined. And so he's like, I need a new pair. And I said, okay, you can buy them. Now, I think at the time, Christopher was probably maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9. And so he looked at his bank, and all of a sudden, the realization of the value of what money really was hit him. And he didn't want to spend his money on it. And I think it taught him a good lesson in one sense, because he actually very quickly learnt the value of money and chose to then want a pair of sand shoes that didn't cost that much. So a happy medium where they weren't really what he wanted, but they were still better than what I probably would have bought him. And I put money into it. We came to this thing, but the amount of times I remember saying to my children, okay, we don't have that money, so I don't care if Paul got that or if Sally got that. We don't have that money, like constantly telling them we don't have that money. And so they've probably grown up with the same mindset as me, sadly. And when you and I started working together and you started like suggesting things to me about money, I was like, what do you like? And talking to me about, you need to, like, it's a vibration. You need to spend, it's an energy. You need to spend money to have money come back in. And no one had ever spoken to me about money in that way. And I really struggled at the start of this journey with the amount of money that I was spending. And the struggle was because I was spending it on myself first and foremost. And I had never spent this level of money on myself. You know, when I like, to give some concept to that, like at one point it was costing me $1,500 a week just for my IV treatments. That didn't include anything else that I was doing. That was just that. And I think I again am very grateful for the work that we did, because you got me to understand that money is just energetics, and that I'd really never wanted for money all my life. So why did I have this overwhelming feeling of scarcity of money? And that I'd always survived. I'd always had everything that we needed. And it led me into a place of not thinking about everything that I spent and having to have a reason for it. Because I would buy myself something prior to having cancer. Like, I would buy myself something and then get it home and spend days justifying why I should keep it.
Mm.
and or I would go on a holiday and spend my whole time on the holiday thinking about how much money I was spending
Mm.
and trying to justify it. And so since we've worked together, and interestingly enough, this online business that I started, a lot of their training is around mindset, your own mindset. And we've done a bit on money as well. And so on top of it, I've read some great books and I've really just learnt to enjoy spending money.
It's also spending money on pain things, like
Yes,
pain and fixing versus pleasure. That's the transition
yes,
that we've really been dancing with. Is how
yes.
you now get to go on the holiday and it doesn't have to be to work or anything like
No,
that, but purely for the joy and the pleasure of it.
yeah. And not, and most importantly, though, not stress about that when I get back. Or, yeah, I just now trust. I trust that the money that's going out is going to come back in. And I I really don't sit and judge myself now about the money I
Amazing.
spend.
And
And
I had you share with one of our groups, and it was really beautiful. But I talk about money can come from all sorts of places, and
yeah,
not necessarily where we think it's going to come from, like our work or inheritance and all those
yeah.
kinds of things. So, what happened for you?
Yeah, so just out of the blue, and I won't really go into the details of who it was or anything, but yeah, out of the blue, and it was definitely nothing that had been discussed previously or hinted at previously, but I was gifted money and a substantial amount of money that would allow me to look at life differently for me and not allow me to not have to rely on working every day to make sure I had money.
Mm.
And it was gifted to me to relieve that financial pressure and let me do some of the things that I've always wanted to do without having to worry about my work or a responsibility somewhere else. And yeah, and it's really just changed how I think about things. And my plan is to start and do some
Yeah, I love that.
travel and spend, I guess, some more time with my family and my grandchildren and having the freedom to be able to do that uh,
Mm.
without constrictions from work or, yeah, having to, yeah, yeah, it was very overwhelming. And my initial reaction was, I can't accept that. And then I was like, no, that's the old me. And
I don't know if we had a conversation. It's like, hang on, Susan, this work is all about the feminine and the receiving, and you've done all this work, and now it's no. Yes.
it's funny because I used to, in all of my visions and everything that we used to do on that side of things, it was always, I wanted to be in a place. So for me, it was my visions were never about having a lot of money per se. My visions were always about being able to be in a place where I could just wake up and do whatever I wanted to that day
Yeah.
and go
That's the really
wherever I wanted
important
to
part
go.
of a vision is like, how do you want to feel? How do you want to be? And
Mm,
sometimes we do have material things in there, and sometimes we might say we want the money. But
yeah.
ultimately, I was thinking this morning, and I've been sharing with my groups recently, particularly with the people who have experienced cancer, stage 4, and some pass
Mm,
whilst I'm working with them, is all they want is the simple stuff.
yes.
And I always remember one woman saying she just loved washing the dishes in the kitchen and having the sun hit her face. And it's
Yeah.
like I was washing the dishes this morning going, oh my gosh, this is what she just wished for.
Yeah.
And here I am going, I hate these freaking dishes. But it's like we come back to these simplicities and ultimately we're really after a feeling.
I think the reality that you need to understand is that money is the engine that will help us to get to a lot of these places.
Yeah.
It's not the enemy, and it's money isn't bad. Money is good because you can do so much good with it. And even if that good's you personally, but me being in that frame of mind and being in that position of peace and freedom is good for everyone around me. It's
Yeah.
not just good for me, but it's good for everyone around me. It opens up my time and my space to be with people that I really value being with. But and also doing things that I've always wanted to do, which is travel. And I'm determined that they're the things that I'm going to concentrate on doing. And it's not about buying the bigger house or it's funny when I bought this place, the plan was to renovate. And
Yeah.
every time I look at that and think, am I going to do that? I then think, yeah, really? I've now
Go
lived with
travel.
this for 12 months. Right? Yes.
Yeah.
And it's really not that bad. Like I've lived
Yeah.
with it quite easily. And what's a priority to me now? It's probably travel,
Yeah. And I'm
you
so
know.
excited for you to go and travel. I think you're going to do it for a significant period of time. Put yourself in, you've built your capacity to have, again, these new experiences, foreign places, even though you have done this in the past. But just with this energy and this mindset, I'm like, you're going to be messaging me, Jin, guess what? And I'll be like, oh,
I, I have traveled in the past, but I think my whole mindset now, I'm excited to travel because I have such a different mindset now.
mm,
When I look back on trips and while I've been to amazing places and I've done amazing things, there was always this underlying stress, financial stress, what I'd left behind with work or there was just always something there. Like every trip, I could sit and I could probably tell you every trip the things that were going on in the
yeah.
background of my mind. And
Or
whereas,
we remember it because of the emotions, and we quite often
yes,
remember things because of the bad emotions, or not the bad, sorry, the
no,
non-negative. And we want to start to anchor in experiences because we have positive emotions as well.
yes. And I think my mindset is just so different now to what it used to be that I'm excited to get out and experiencing travel in that different mindset that I'm in because I think it will be a whole new experience for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
My accountability for you is just make sure you book that holiday and you go.
Yeah.
And yeah, there might be some challenges, but I know you can deal with it. Now, I wasn't thinking of asking you this question, but I would love, I know two of your children, and the third I don't know so much about personally, but tell me a little bit about what each of your family mean to you, your children.
Oh. Obviously, they've been such a major part of my life. Becoming a widow at 23, someone asked me the other day about what was that like, and I said, "Oh, really, I wanted to curl up and die, but I had 3 kids, and so I got up every day and did what I had to do." But, I feel so blessed and fortunate that we have had such a rich and close relationship together, all three of us. And yes, we've had our moments, but they're all very different in personalities, but we all just have this bond that, yeah, I hope never ever gets broken. And it's probably the most important thing to me when it comes to the kids. Christopher, who's the eldest, is, yeah, he's probably not a great communicator, and I hope one day he does some work on that for his sake, really. But he's also, I've watched him grow. He's an amazing father and husband, and yeah, he's now surrounded, like he grew up with 3 women and he's now surrounded with 4, his 3 daughters and his wife. And I sometimes feel for him because I know he always, I think he always loved male companion. And when Lauren met her partner and now husband, I think Christopher loved the fact that he had another male in the family, but the women have definitely outshone them. And yeah, Bianca's Bianca's a striver for work. I see a lot of me in her when it comes to her work and her commitment. And I hope too that one day, though, she sees the importance of stepping back from that to some degree and taking more care of herself. Because I think, like me, she's so committed to everything that she does, and she works hard to see it through at whatever cost. And while that's great, I personally don't think any employer really understands the value of that. And even if you're working for yourself, I think you still have to, at some point, get to a better balance in life. For her, I hope she finds that. She's extremely caring. She's all my kids, if I asked, they'd drop everything and come and help me. And Lauren, who's my youngest, who's now got 3 children, two girls and a boy, is married to Jake. They're up in Byron. I think, her and Jake are in a very fortunate position, but I was chatting to her the other day, and I think she still sees where she gets trapped in things that consume her. And yeah, she's working hard to try and change that, but she's been a huge help in my healing, in research. She's an amazing researcher, and she finds the answers, or she finds information. Like, I could be searching and then she'll go, here you go. In any field, right? If you want to travel somewhere, she'll just go, bang, here, look at these places. And yeah, she's so resourceful and so caring. All of them are very caring for me, and I feel very blessed that I have such close relationship and bond with them all. And yeah, we've had many good times. And whilst I'm their parent, I have a individual friendship with each of them as well. Yeah, so I feel very blessed.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing and for all the emotion that you've been open to sharing as well. I know we've gone back and forth a few times over the last few months going, when are we going to record this? It's
I
almost
know.
months since that surgery. Is there any last words that you want to share with anyone?
I don't know. I think I'd just say that no matter what path you choose in life, and whether you've got an illness or haven't got an illness, or it isn't, life's always going to throw up challenges. But I think the most important thing is to understand yourself and how those challenges affect you. And that awareness I think will help you deal with everything so much better in life. And
Amazing.
that's what we can do, is do what we can do at the time. And I think people find that awareness in their own time. My hope is that people don't wait till they get an illness to find it, because it's, I don't know, it's a lot easier to get yourself healthy than it is to heal. And I mean that not just in physical health, I mean your emotional health, your mental health. I mean it in all aspects. A lot of people think I just talk, I just mean about physical health, but no, in all aspects. It's a lot easier to work on that than it is to heal and try and work on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And you are one of the wonderful real life case studies, stories of transformation in my new book, Healing Beyond the Diagnoses. I've popped you in part 5, which is create emotional safety.
That's honey. Five's my favorite number.
Oh, isn't that really funny? I'm doing this magic number launch with the limited edition version.
Yes.
People get to choose a number, and I know you pulled a card and you've chosen
Yep.
your number 17.
Mm.
But it's funny that, yeah, you're in part 5, create emotional safety. And that's because it was actually an event, a breath work and an ice bath session that triggered a cascade of
Yeah.
dysregulation in your body that sent you to the doctor and then investigating this lump that you had. And I was actually just listening to some messages from Lauren, and I was sharing this with you earlier, and she said, I had no idea that Mum Susan was a case study in your book. I'm really excited to read it, and I love reading these health books and reading the case studies, but I always wonder, are they making this up? Is this real? And she said, but obviously your stories are real. So
Yeah.
people get to hear your story on the podcast, the first one before I even knew that I was going to be writing about this. And I know that everyone, because I've been connecting with people and some of them are from almost a decade ago now, their life has changed so much. So it's almost
Mm.
like we're going to probably have to do an updated version, a third or fourth podcast of what challenges are going on and what
Yeah.
amazing things are you celebrating in your life, because I
Yeah,
know
I'd love
stuff
to.
is on your vision.
No, that's the fun part of all of this. I actually am really enjoying that part of it.
Yeah. And thank you for your determination with it. Like sometimes my nagging that is accountability. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story once again.